My mom's cancer battle was fake, and we lost our house because of it. My mother was diagnosed with terminal cancer. Our family came together to fight, but 3 years and a lost house later, I discovered the battle was all a lie. My name is Maya, and I was 19 years old when my mother, Diana, tore our family apart with a single, monstrous lie. It began, as these stories often do, in a sterile, white-walled doctor's office, the air thick with the scent of antiseptic and unspoken fear. I remember the way the fluorescent lights hummed overhead, a relentless, buzzing soundtrack to the worst day of our lives. My father, Robert, sat beside her, his hand clutching hers so tightly his knuckles were white. My older brother, Liam, and my younger sister, Olivia, and I were crammed into the small room, a huddled mass of anxiety and hope. The doctor, a man with a kind face and weary eyes, used words like aggressive, inoperable, and palliative care. Each one was a physical blow, a hammer against the fragile structure of our world. The word cancer itself hung in the air, a venomous cloud that poisoned everything it touched. In that moment, looking at my mother's pale, tear-streaked face, I would have done anything, sacrificed anything, to make it go away. That was the first trap. The lie was so perfectly constructed, so monstrously believable, because it was built on the foundation of our love for her. In the weeks that followed, our home transformed from a bustling hub of family life into a somber war room. The cancer battle, as we came to call it, became our sole purpose. The refrigerator was covered in inspirational quotes and medication schedules. Friends and family brought over casseroles and offered whispered condolences. Our lives, once filled with the mundane joys of school, work, and weekend barbecues, were now consumed by doctor's appointments, treatment research, and a pervasive, crushing sadness. My mother, once a vibrant woman who filled our home with laughter and the smell of baking, became a fragile, tragic figure. She moved through the house like a ghost, her skin taking on a sallow, almost translucent quality. She spent most of her days in bed, surrounded by books on holistic healing and journals where she penned her innermost thoughts about her fight. We worshipped her. We catered to her every need, our own lives fading into the background as we focused entirely on her. My father, a man who had always been our rock, seemed to shrink under the weight of it all. He would sit by her bed for hours, just holding her hand, his face a mask of quiet desperation. We were a unit, a family fortress built to protect our queen as she faced the ultimate enemy. We had no idea the enemy was already inside the walls, sleeping in the master bedroom, and planning our complete and utter destruction. We vowed, all of us, that we would face this together. We win this battle, no matter the cost. We just never imagined how high that cost would truly be. The cost began to materialize in the most tangible of ways: money. The initial prognosis had been grim, but my mother, after weeks of what she described as deep research and soul-searching, decided to forego traditional chemotherapy. She claimed it was a poison, a corporate scam that would only destroy what little quality of life she had left. Instead, she had found a network of alternative treatment specialists. These weren't covered by insurance, of course. They were exclusive, expensive clinics in places like Switzerland and Mexico, offering groundbreaking, natural cures that the mainstream medical community didn't want us to know about. The first treatment plan cost $25,000. My father, without a moment's hesitation, cashed out a significant portion of his 401k. He said it was just money, and you can't put a price on a life. That was just the beginning. Soon, the requests for funds became a regular, almost weekly occurrence. There were special supplements imported from the Amazon rainforest, energy healing sessions with a renowned shaman, and a constant stream of new, experimental treatments that promised hope but delivered only a deeper financial hole. To keep up, my father, a proud man who had worked at the same engineering firm for 25 years, had to make sacrifices that still make my chest ache to think about. He took on a second job, working nights at a warehouse, his hands becoming calloused and his eyes perpetually shadowed with exhaustion. When that wasn't enough, he added a third job on weekends, doing handyman work for anyone who would hire him. The man who used to coach my brother's soccer team and help me with my science projects became a stranger in our own home, a fleeting presence who smelled of sawdust and industrial soap, collapsing into bed for a few hours before starting the cycle all over again. The strain rippled outwards. My brother, Liam, who was 2 years into a promising career in another state, quit his job and moved back home. He said he couldn't focus, knowing his mom was sick. He took a job at a local grocery store to contribute. My sister, Olivia, deferred her acceptance to a prestigious art school, choosing instead to enroll at the local community college so she could be close to home and help with mom's care. And then there was me. My college fund, the one my grandparents had so carefully contributed to for my entire life, was the next to go. My father sat me down, his face etched with a pain so deep it seemed to have carved lines into his soul, and explained that the money was needed for a revolutionary new immunotherapy treatment. I told him it was fine, that mom's health was more important than any degree. I meant it then. We all did. We sold our boat, our vintage comic book collection, anything of value. We switched to generic everything, ate cheap pasta until we never wanted to see it again, and stopped all non-essential spending. Our lives were stripped down to the bare bones, all in service of my mother's survival. The money was disappearing faster than we could earn it, and mom's condition seemed to be getting worse, not better. 2 years into the battle, the atmosphere in our home had grown heavy, suffocating. The constant sacrifice was wearing us all thin, fraying the edges of our once unbreakable bond. My father was a ghost of his former self, a man hollowed out by work and worry. My siblings and I moved through our days in a state of numb obligation. But through the exhaustion, I started to notice things. Small, strange inconsistencies that pricked at the corners of my mind, like a splinter you can't quite reach. My mother, for all her supposed frailty, would have moments of baffling energy. There were days she'd spend hours in her room, claiming the weakness was overwhelming, yet I'd hear her on the phone, her voice bright and animated, a tone I hadn't heard in years. When I'd ask who she was talking to, she'd wave a dismissive hand and say it was a cancer support buddy. But the laughter I heard through the door didn't sound like the shared commiseration of the terminally ill. It sounded like flirting. Then there were the packages. They started arriving once or twice a week, always in discreet brown boxes. My mother would snatch them from the delivery person and disappear into a room with them. When I asked what they were, she'd say they were her specialized medications and supplements. But one day, a box was left on the porch by mistake, unattended. Curiosity, a trait I usually kept in check, got the better of me. The box was from a high-end cosmetics company. Inside, nestled in silk paper, was a $500 face serum and a bottle of perfume. I had seen my mother's face, pale and drawn from her illness. She had no energy to even brush her hair some days. Why would she need luxury face cream? The question festered in my mind. I started watching her more closely. I noticed how she would meticulously apply makeup before her doctor's appointments, which were always conducted via video call. I saw how she would spend hours on her laptop, the screen angled away from the door, a small secretive smile on her lips. The biggest red flag came when I was looking for a document on the family computer. I opened the browser history to find a link I'd used earlier, and a list of recently visited pages popped up. Mixed in with the legitimate cancer research sites were pages for romantic getaways in Napa Valley, reviews for 5-star restaurants in New York City, and a shopping cart filled with designer clothing on a website I'd never heard of. The timeline didn't make sense. These searches were happening on days when she was too weak to even get out of bed. The financial pressure was at its absolute peak. We had received a notice of default on our mortgage. The bank was going to foreclose. My father had broken down in the kitchen, his face in his hands, admitting he just didn't know what else to do. That night, I went into my mother's room to get her laundry basket. Tucked inside a book of inspirational quotes for cancer warriors that lay on her nightstand, I found a receipt for a 2-night stay at a 5-star resort dated for last month. The receipt felt like a block of ice in my hand. A $400 a night suite complete with champagne service and couples massages. The date was seared into my memory because it was the same week my father had taken on his third job, sobbing quietly to my mother on the phone about how he felt like he was failing her. The world tilted on its axis. A cold, nauseating wave of dread washed over me, followed by a surge of white-hot rage. This wasn't just a discrepancy. This was a betrayal of a magnitude I couldn't even begin to process. I had to know more. The next day, I feigned illness to stay home from my community college classes, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. I knew my mother had a telemedicine appointment at 10, which usually meant she'd be locked in her room for an hour. My opportunity came when she left to take a long, medicinal bath, leaving her laptop open on the kitchen table. It was a gift from the universe. My hands trembled as I sat down. I didn't know her password, but I noticed a second user profile on the login screen, one named Diana_2. It was unlocked. I clicked it, and the screen opened to a world that had nothing to do with cancer and everything to do with a life of fantasy and deceit. The desktop background was a picture of a ruggedly handsome man with a salt and pepper beard, standing on the deck of a sailboat. The browser history was a roadmap to her secret life. There were flight confirmations to places I'd only dreamed of visiting, hotel bookings and reservations for expensive tasting menus. But the real horror was in her email. I opened her inbox, and there it was, a years-long correspondence with a man named Mark. The first few emails were innocent enough, from a support group for widows and divorcees, but they quickly evolved into something intimate, something deeply personal. He thought her name was Diana. He thought she was a wealthy, child-free divorcee from a neighboring state who had sold her successful tech company and was living a life of leisure. He had no idea she was married, a mother of 3, and pretending to be dying of cancer. I scrolled through the messages, my blood running cold. She told him she was investing our family's savings. Money she'd claimed was from a divorce settlement. I saw the bank transfer records. Thousands of dollars, tens thousands of dollars, wired from our joint family account to Mark's personal account. The money for her alternative treatments, my father's 401k, my college fund. All of it was being funneled to this man, this stranger, who was living a life of luxury funded by my father's sweat and our family's ruin. The most recent email was from Mark, telling her he couldn't wait to see her next month in Bali, where he had booked a private villa for them for 2 weeks. It wasn't just an affair. She had built an entirely new life with this man, a life funded by my father's desperation and our family's sacrifice. The evidence was a searing brand on my mind. I printed out a few of the most incriminating emails, the bank statements and the hotel receipts, my hands shaking so badly the paper rustled loudly in the silent kitchen. The first person I had to tell was my father. There was no one else. I found him in the garage, his shoulders slumped over the engine of his old truck, the only thing we had left of any real value that hadn't been sold. He looked up, his face etched with exhaustion, and asked me what was wrong. I couldn't speak. I just handed him the stack of papers. I watched as his eyes scanned the documents. His expression didn't change at first. He just kept reading, his brow furrowed in concentration. Then, slowly, his face began to crumble. It wasn't an explosion of anger, but a slow, agonizing implosion. The color drained from his face, his jaw went slack, and the papers fell from his hands, scattering like dead leaves on the concrete floor. He didn't say a word. He just sank onto a stool, his entire body seeming to deflate, and looked at me with an expression of such profound, soul-crushing devastation that it will haunt me for the rest of my life. He looked 10 years older in that single moment. We sat there in the heavy silence of the garage for what felt like an eternity, the truth of my mother's monstrous betrayal hanging between us, thick and suffocating. Finally, he spoke, his voice a dry, raspy whisper. He said we had to confront her, together. We waited in the living room that evening, the printed evidence spread out on the coffee table like a crime scene. When she came downstairs, dressed in a silk robe, looking for all the world like a woman recovering from a grueling ordeal, she stopped short. She saw the papers, she saw our faces, and for a fleeting second, I saw a flicker of panic in her eyes. It was quickly replaced by a look of wounded innocence. She asked what was going on, her voice weak and frail. My father, who had found a reserve of strength I didn't know he possessed, simply pointed to the table. He told her to explain. The denial was immediate and tearful. She accused us of spying, of distrusting her in her darkest hour. She played the victim, a masterful performance she had been perfecting for years. But my father was unmoved. He picked up the email from Mark, the one about Bali, and read it aloud. His voice was flat, devoid of emotion, which made it all the more devastating. As he read, her performance began to crumble. The tears stopped. The frailty vanished, replaced by a cold, defensive anger. The confession, when it finally came, was not an apology. It was a torrent of self-pity and justification. She was lonely, she felt unappreciated. My father was always working, we were always busy, and she felt like her life was passing her by. Mark, she said, made her feel alive again. She never once looked at us, at the faces of the children she had bankrupted and the husband she had psychologically destroyed. She was only sorry that she had been caught. In the deafening silence that followed her confession, the only sound was my father's quiet, broken sob, and I knew our family would never be the same again. The aftermath was a nuclear winter, a landscape of emotional rubble and radioactive silence. The confession had detonated our family, and the fallout was immediate and absolute. My father didn't yell, he didn't scream. He simply stood up, walked to the guest room, and packed a single suitcase. He left without saying another word to her, moving in with his brother who lived a few towns over. The sight of his empty side of the bed, the space he had occupied for over 20 years, was a gaping wound in the house. My siblings, Liam and Olivia, were a whirlwind of fury and grief. Liam punched a hole in the wall of his bedroom, a raw physical expression of the impotent rage we all felt. Olivia just cried, for days, her quiet sobs a constant, heartbreaking soundtrack to our new reality. The truth, as it always does, began to leak out. My father had to tell his parents, our aunts and uncles. The family fractured. Some sided with my mother, unable to reconcile the woman they knew with such a calculated deception. Others were horrified, their support rallying around my father and us. The phone calls were the worst. The hushed whispers, the morbid curiosity, the judgment. We became a cautionary tale, the family who had been scammed by their own wife and mother. The practical nightmare began almost immediately. The mortgage, the one we had been fighting to save, was now an anchor around our necks. With my father gone and the truth exposed, there was no reason to stay. The house, once a symbol of our unity and love, was now a crime scene, a monument to a lie. We had to sell. The process of packing was a form of torture. Every object we picked up was tainted. The family photos in the hallway, where we all smiled for the camera, my mother looking pale but brave, now seemed like propaganda from a dictatorship. The living room furniture, where we had huddled together for comfort, felt like the set of a play. We sold the house for a fraction of what it was worth, just to be rid of it. The proceeds were split by lawyers, a cold, impersonal division of the remnants of our lives. My father used his share to put a down payment on a small 2-bedroom apartment. Liam, Olivia, and I moved in with him, sleeping on air mattresses in the living room. We were broke, we were homeless, and we were utterly broken. On the last day, as the movers loaded the last of our boxes onto the truck, I stood in the empty living room. I ran my hand over the dusty fireplace mantle, the place where my mother's cancer battle had been orchestrated. I thought of all the sacrifices, the lost jobs, the stolen education, the years of my father's life he would never get back. As the front door closed for the last time, it wasn't just a house we were leaving behind. It was the entire foundation of our lives, and we were stepping into a world we didn't recognize. It's been 2 years since we walked away from that house. 2 years of rebuilding from the ground up. Life is different now. It's smaller, quieter, but it's honest. My father lives in that small apartment, and it's the most peaceful I've ever seen him. The exhaustion is gone, replaced by a deep, lingering sadness, but also a resilience that shines through. He and I have a relationship now that is more real than anything we had before. We talk, truly talk, about our feelings, our fears, and our hopes. We don't have much, but we have each other, and that's more than enough. Liam went back to school, using a student loan and working part-time, determined to finish the degree he put on hold. Olivia is finally pursuing her art, her work now filled with a raw, powerful emotion that it never had before. We are a family forged in the fire of a devastating truth. We are broke, but we are no longer living in a debt of lies. Forgiveness is a complicated word. I don't think I can ever forgive my mother for what she did. The betrayal was too deep, the damage too extensive. But I have learned to forgive myself for my anger, and I've learned to let go of the bitterness so it doesn't poison my own future. We had to forgive her for our own sake, not for hers, so that we could move forward. I saw her once, about a year ago. I was at the grocery store, and I saw her in the produce aisle. She looked older, haggard. The life of luxury she had fabricated with Mark had evaporated the moment the money stopped. He, apparently, vanished when he learned the truth about her. She was alone. She saw me, and for a moment, our eyes locked. There was no remorse in her gaze, only a flicker of the same selfish entitlement that had destroyed us all. I just turned and walked away. We lost our house, our savings, and the mother we thought we had. But in the wreckage of that life, we found an unbreakable bond. We are a family of 4 now, not 5. We live in a small apartment, we eat dinner around a cramped table, and we count every penny. But when we laugh now, it's real. When we cry, it's genuine. We are rebuilding our lives on a foundation of truth, and it is the strongest foundation we have ever known. We survived the ultimate betrayal, and in doing so, we learned what it truly means to be a family.